First of all, congratulations. You took the helm of the finance minister just recently.
Yes.
And you've maintained your forecast for growth of 3% for Brazil. Why are you so confident about your projections?
Yes, we do. We keep our forecast for 3%. When you look to the numbers in Brazil, you see that all the sectors are growing. So, and most important, the investment is picking up. So this is a very consistent recovery. And we are observing good numbers since the last year. And our expectation is that Brazil this year will be able to grow above the potential GDP growth. For example, you mentioned the IMF forecast for 2018, which is 2.3, which is consistent with our forecast of potential GDP growth for Brazil going forward without the structural reforms. But we think this year we will also benefit from the impact of monetary policy. As you know, we have inflation under control in Brazil, and because of that, we were able to reduce significantly interest rates. And this will have a positive impact on growth this year in our view. So that's why our forecast for growth this year are a little bit higher than the IMF forecast.
And the real has weakened significantly. Are you counting on cheaper exports to help your growth?
This is another important drive for growth, and by the way, it is Brazil. This is another important message. We need to have more integration with the international economy, so we have to import more and to export more to become more open, and this, of course, will help us to sustain growth going forward and also to improve our productivity. So this is the challenge we have. We have to increase the productivity of Brazilian economy, face the reforms, the fiscal challenge that we still have to keep on growing as we are growing today.
How much is your economy going to be helped by the U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports and Chinese tariffs on U.S. imports, especially when it comes to grains?
Look, Shery, we may even benefit from some specific discussions between two countries. But when we look to international trade, what we really want is, as I said, is to have more integration in international trade. So for us, we really need a rule-based trade. We want to be more integrated to the international economy. We are discussing Mercosur and the European Union trade the agreements. So although we could benefit in the short run from one or other dispute, what we really want in the medium to the long term is to avoid protectionism and to have more free trade with clear and transparent rules, because this is what will help us to be more integrated in the international economy.
Brazil got temporary exemptions on U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs, which run out at the end of the month. What's the latest that you've heard?
This is still being discussed, so this is a negotiation that has been conducted by the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
And of course, that accounts for a lot of Brazil's exports. Iron ore, I believe, was worth $3 billion worth of products to the U.S. in 2017. If those tariffs are applied, how much of an impact will they have to your economy?
It's difficult to say which will be the impact on the economy. Of course, it's, as I said, we need more integration. So what we'll continue to do, Shery, is to discuss Mercosur and the European Union. Brazil wants to become an open economy. So this is the right direction for us. Independent of the short-term discussion, we will keep on discussing with the G20 group to have more integration with other countries. This is the right way for us.
You were talking about monetary policy earlier, but we have seen the recent commodities price surges leading to more concerns of inflation here in the U.S. If the Federal Reserve hikes rates faster, what buffers does Brazil have to be able to mitigate the effects of that?
This is a very important discussion. So we know the short-term perspectives for the world economy are good. I just came from the World Bank. We are discussing the forecast for this year and next year, which are very strong, 3.9% growth for the world economy. But we have to be prepared for normalization of monetary policy going forward. So we have to strengthen the buffers of the Brazilian economy. And I think the biggest challenge that we still have ahead of us is to improve the fiscal stance, continue to move towards fiscal consolidation. And the most important pending issue that we have today is the pension reform. So this is absolutely necessary for Brazil. We have to approve the pension reform, and this is our top priority for the country, not for this year, but for the short run.
Especially given that you now have a hard budget cap for federal expenditure.
Yes.
So how does that work out if you don't get a resolution on pension reform, which has already been delayed?
Yes, this is a very important point. Let me explain this. We have this spending cap. So the reason behind the deterioration of the fiscal accounting in Brazil was the growth of primary expenditures. So with the spending cap that we approved in 2016, expenditures will go down year after year. But in order to make it feasible, because mandatory expenditures are continuing to grow because of the lack of the pension reform. So this is the key issue. We have to approve the pension reform because this is what will make the spending cap feasible going forward. So
at least you had some regulatory reform, regulatory overhaul when it comes to the oil sector, and that seems to have paid off. You had record-breaking offshore auctions last month. How important will this sort of foreign direct investment be for the sector and for the Brazilian economy?
This is very important, and that's why one of the priorities we have this year, let me mention two priorities for this year, which is the capitalization of Eletrobras and the auction that we can have related to the pre-salt area involving the reserves of oil of Petrobras. So this is very important for the country because we will attract huge amount of investments to these important sectors. So we have to have a very good regulatory framework to give the confidence to investors that Brazil has stable rules, predictable rules, and so they are comfortable to invest in Brazil. And as you said, we made a lot of important changes in the oil sector, and the result was pretty much clear in the recent auctions.
In the meantime, you have uncertainty because of the upcoming presidential elections. How will that affect the markets?
It can affect. Elections are always a period where we can have more volatility. So our better response to this possibility of having volatility going forward is to continue to work on the reform agenda that we have today. So the government of President Temer has already implemented very important reforms like the spending cap, labor reform, and now we still have an important reform agenda that we are discussing with Congress. And this is the best answer we have. It's to strengthen the buffers of the Brazilian economy.
Just quickly, your predecessor, Minister Meirelles, is considering running for president. Given his background, good or bad for the markets?
It would be an outstanding news for the market. Minister Meirelles has done a very good job, not only as a Minister of Finance, but also as a governor of the central bank. He's an outstanding person.